Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaRevelis and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link down in the description to the page, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. My name is Joshua Revelis. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down with fellow enthusiasts to talk about what's going on in the technology, business, and gaming world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Revelis. I'm your host as usual, and I'm probably just as confused as you guys are when it comes to what Apple's been up to this week, because clearly they've done something they're not usually known for doing, and we're going to talk about that, which today's episode is basically going to be focused on Apple surprise releases. What do they mean? Because it is an interesting, I'd say, shift in what Apple's doing, specifically because they normally don't do this. They normally don't release new hardware unannounced. They always do it at a press conference. They always do it in a conference style setting to at least build anticipation and build hype, which is kind of weird because they released all these 3 or specifically 4 new products before the conference on Monday, this coming Monday, the 25th. And not only does it fuel my speculation even more of realistically we know what the conference is going to be on Monday and what it will be about, but I think realistically we should just talk about, what was released, what do they mean to the market, like try to understand the pattern it was done in, and realistically what does it mean before the conference on the 25th, and what is Apple planning to do because of it. So it was interesting what they did. So Monday was dedicated towards the iPads, which is why we ended up getting the new iPad Mini 5 and the iPad Air 3, which I talked about on Wednesday's episode. And then we had on Tuesday, we had the iMacs get an upgrade. And so the iMac upgrade, all it really was the iMac ended up getting the 8th gen processor, which they needed because they were stuck on the 7th gen processors from Intel. So that means now they are 6 and 8 core processors inside of the Macs now. Obviously, you pay more to get the higher cores and everything. And then even the iMac Pro got an upgrade, except its update was more towards RAM and a new graphics card. Obviously, it increases the price of it by a lot more because we're adding an extra $5,000 on top of it now for just the RAM. The graphics card is probably a little bit more as well. I think it's an extra $2,000 to $3,000. Don't quote me on it. Don't quote me on this. But I know it's definitely more, and it raises the price up to, I think it was almost close to $20,000 now, which is absurd. And yeah, we're getting there with that machine. Obviously, my opinion still stands with the iMac Pros. If you don't do a lot of heavy video editing, you're not running a big studio and everything that needs high-end equipment, don't buy it. Just don't even bother buying it. It's not worth your money. The starting price is $5,000. You don't need that. And then on Tuesday, we got the AirPods, which for me, that is weird that they went with the AirPods earlier. Because obviously we were expecting new AirPods. Clearly, the AirPods are about 3 years old now. They came out in 2016. Obviously, they've been one of Apple's most successful products they come out with in a long time. And now they have a second iteration. Obviously, the only upgrades is the 50% longer talk time, the wireless charging case, and the new H1 chip instead of the W1. So realistically, not that many changes. If you still have AirPods and you just want wireless charging, then the case is just $80. My opinion is I don't realistically see a point to get them. I rather treat the new AirPod 2s as AirPods 1.5 because I know for a fact we're gonna get a legit second generation AirPods. I know we will, and those will have better sound and better battery overall, and they'll probably come in more colors, which we were expecting. We want them in black. That's what we want because obviously matte black life. Yeah, you can go ask Marquez that he literally made a shirt called Matte Black Everything. So it's crazy. And then, yeah, so those were the 3 products. Obviously, it was in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the first 3 days of the week. And obviously, because of that, we were expecting, okay, what else could they release? Sorry. When we look at it, we were actually expecting AirPower. And for some of you probably don't even know what AirPower is. AirPower is Apple's wireless charger that they were working on that will charge up to 3 devices at the same time. And we were expecting this product for a while. Like, we thought it would come out in 2018 when they originally announced it. And obviously there's been a lot of delays, engineering flaws going on behind the scenes. So we thought they'd killed the product. But when you look at the AirPods 2 page, for some reason it's on there. They updated it, and obviously it's not an old stock photo because it has the new iPhone XS Max. And to me, we thought it was going to come out either yesterday or today. Obviously it didn't. But this kind of fuels the rumors that Apple might actually end up releasing AirPower, which I'm assuming, based on the internet's reaction, most people don't really care anymore. I know it's kind of sad to say, but the fact that Apple took so long to make a wireless charger, and they're probably going to charge like close to $200 for it, being realistically, no one's going to care about it because they can just get a cheap wireless charger that's basically the exact same thing for less, for literally a fraction of the cost. So I think realistically, Apple should just come out with it, and they know it's going to fail realistically because nobody cares about it anymore. People are still going to buy it just to have it. And, yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. But it's weird that they did this. They did this in a very interesting pattern because they didn't say anything about it. And Apple, like I said, Apple's not known for doing this. They're not known for releasing new products unannounced. They're not. They always... Realistically, there's always some leaks or something beforehand. Obviously, yes, the AirPods, we knew they were coming, but we didn't realize there was going to be a new iPad Mini 5 or Air 3 or iMac upgrades. We didn't. And, this caught a lot of people off guard because we didn't know about it. And it's interesting because Apple's not known for doing this. They always like creating a spectacle out of it before they release something. They generate hype. They're hype machines. That's why their marketing is second to none because... in my opinion, out of all the tech companies, they are the best when it comes to marketing. They can sell you a product with their marketing. It's just that good. That's how they advertise themselves effectively, and that's how they're in the hands of the most users. But, let's talk about we already talked about what the iPad does for the market. Let's talk about what is the new iMacs. In my opinion, the new iMacs, all it really does is, we give the new regular iMacs an 8th gen core. I think they needed them. In my opinion, the 7th gen Intels are getting outdated at this point. Like, I really think, yes, as a production machine, it needs to have the 8th gen, which is good. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how it handles those things, because if it puts an i9 in there, then, we have to be very mindful that this thing might overheat. And the new iMac Pro upgrade, realistically, unless if you really want the new graphics card, that's pretty much it. But the RAM upgrade to 256 gigabytes of RAM, you better be pushing that sucker. I know that people like Marquez probably might buy it because Marquez records videos in 8K. So that's the reason why he has a fully maxed out iMac Pro in his studio. So I think people like him will probably benefit from the more RAM, but that's realistically normal user case. You're never going to need that ever in your life. New AirPods. Obviously, yes. People have been clamoring for new AirPods for a while now. They're 3 years old. Obviously, yes, they're very popular devices. You see them, most Christmas gifts from last year, or even I'd argue 2017, people were getting AirPods, and they obviously, So new AirPods, my opinion, they're not worth it. I would wait until we get the legit second generation, because to my opinion, these aren't second generation. These are just 1.5 because there's no noticeable upgrade. I get it that some people say that you can't upgrade the sound on them. I call BS on that because you can. How do I know that? Because other companies have done that. They've upgraded their earbud sound qualities multiple times, and that's even with a similar form factor to the AirPods. So I do believe, yes, later in the year, in the September conference or October, whenever they decide to do it, or WWDC, which is the event in the summer, Apple's going to show off new AirPods with new colors, and they're going to be the legit Generation 2, in my opinion. I feel like that's what they'll do. Obviously, we already talked about what the iPads are going to do to the market, and that's my opinion on what the Macs and the new AirPods will do to the market. But specifically, is what does this mean before the press conference on the 25th? And it's interesting because Apple's already advertised this press conference months in advance. We already knew it was coming on the 25th. It's interesting, though, that they basically got all the hardware out of the way because they're not going to show new iPhones on March 25th. Like, come on, guys, let's be real. The new iPhones are coming in September or October, whenever they do that conference. That's when they usually release them. It's always near the end of the year because that's the iPhone trend, is they come out during near the end of the year for the holiday season. But the 25th conference, or the conference on the 25th, my opinion, and realistically, I think this is what the internet can agree on, we know the conference is going to be focused on services. What do I mean by that? The rumors is that Apple's been working on their own streaming TV service to replace Apple TV. In my opinion, I believe that is a great choice to get rid of the Apple TV. In my opinion, the Apple TV is one of the single biggest jokes Apple ever made. It was overpriced and it was basically useless, in my opinion. It had no purpose to exist. Even diehard Apple fans will agree that it sucked. It was terrible. It shouldn't exist. Like a Chromecast is better than it. That's just a proven fact. Streaming cable was far more ahead than the Apple TV, and that's why I feel like Apple is pivoting in the right direction now. They're switching their focus from this big old clunky box that needs its own wall adapter for it. Like, dude, this is dumb. And it has storage too. Like, it's streaming. I don't need to save this anywhere. But you get the point. They're switching to streaming cable. I think this is a good deal. Obviously, Apple, they're going to charge a little bit more, being realistically when it comes to revenue sharing. I don't think Apple's going to give I'm not going to say a fair cut, but I think it's going to be a 50-50 cut with whoever partners with them to put on their streaming platform. But there's also goes into the speculation that Apple's going to go into the gaming streaming service as well. The same thing like Google did, obviously to my opinion, maybe a smaller degree, because if we're being honest, in infrastructure-wise and cloud management, Apple is nowhere near where Google is, in my opinion. Like, if you want to compare the iCloud and Google Drive and things like that, realistically, the Google Drive is just so much more ahead, and Google's storage system or cloud-based storage is so much more advanced. So it's going to be interesting on what Apple does with the game streaming service specifically. But, these are all just speculations because they basically got rid of hardware. Like, unless if they drop AirPower on the day of the conference, then that'll probably be the only hardware thing. But realistically, I don't see what they could do. There's not much they can do, realistically. Now, what does this mean for Apple specifically? Why? I think specifically how a lot of us were saying at the beginning of the year that Apple's pivoting towards a more software-focused approach because, like I mentioned before, and a lot of analytics have explained, the smartphone market is peaking. People aren't buying smartphones at the same rate they were a long time ago. Or when I say a long time ago, I realistically say like about a decade ago. Like, the exponential growth is peaking. That means that instead of people buying a new phone every year, people are holding onto their phones even longer because phones are getting better and better. And the fact that even Apple is supporting iPhones up to 5 years, you get what I mean, is it takes away the incentive to upgrade. Because starting with the A11, realistically, that's when the Apple chip started becoming very advanced. And then we have the A12, and now we're going to get the A13. And Apple's starting to realize that their software isn't going to cut it, or their hardware isn't going to cut it as much anymore. And they have to start pivoting to a more software-focused approach or services, realistically. It's the same thing with the gaming industry. The gaming industry is switching towards a live service approach. So Apple's catching on to this, and now they're going to go and jump the gun before everybody else in the smartphone market catches on. Obviously, Google's already doing that. They did it first, clearly. Really, Google was a service company, or software specifically, before they started making their own good hardware. And obviously, Samsung, they're not really doing services. They're obviously just still making phones and hardware. So Apple is definitely, realistically, they're gonna be ahead of the curve. especially because Apple already has a lot of good services. Apple Music, I don't personally use it, but I agree that it's a very popular service to use. I agree things like, what's it called? Specifically like things or software coming to the iPads now, that the fact that they're going to put Photoshop on them, and they're going to put, obviously they're putting more optimized hardware or software for the hardware. So now you can get more power out, really use the iPad to its fullest potential, realistically. And obviously, yes, iOS 12 was more focused on speed and speeding up the performance and optimization rather than actual like adding new features. It was just meant to help clean up the system. Obviously, yes, it came with its own issues, but still it did its job. And Apple's pivoting towards a more services approach now. They're basically taking the hint from the gaming services or live services from the gaming industry, even though live service approach in video games is semi-working. It's a lot of gamers are pissed about it because there's a lot of companies that don't do it right. Obviously, like EA and Activision, they're failing at this miserably because they're basically milking the sucker to death and making crap. Anthem is garbage. Let's be real here, guys. It's not a good game. It's terrible. It has very appealing aesthetics, but it's just not a good game. It's flawed. It's bug-ridden. And it's missing so much content, and they're planning on adding it. And then obviously, like, a lot of companies were already doing this before. Now they're jumping to it, like Assassin's Creed. And then you got Ubisoft specifically. They're doing that stuff now, like The Division 2. And then you got Activision. They were trying to do it with Bungie. And then, Bungie obviously is changing their ways to a degree now. But obviously, yeah, they're still keeping on the live service approach and everything. And we'll see how they do in their next outing with Destiny 3. But you get the point. This whole focus on services is leading companies to evolve how they conduct their business, clearly, is what it's doing. And Apple, I feel like, can do the thing properly. Realistically, I think they can. But it just comes down to how they approach it. Obviously, their streaming cable service, if it is real, but we know it probably is, and the game streaming service as well. Like, realistically, I think it would be a good move for Apple because they have to start pivoting towards services because their hardware is already good. It's solid, but their software game does need to kick up and to optimize their hardware more. And it's what they really need to do because they have a lot of powerful hardware, guys. Let's be real. The iMac Pro is a monster. The MacBook Pros are monsters when they're working. The iPad Pros are monsters, but obviously even the iPad Pros are heavily limited because of iOS. The iPhones are monsters in terms of performance. Apple realizes their hardware has gotten so good, they need services on that hardware. And if you think about it, really the only service they have is Apple Music. That's it. Like, they don't really have anything else besides Apple Podcasts too, but that's basically the same thing as Apple Music, just for podcasts. Well, they split it up, and obviously, they're competing with Spotify and everything. And obviously, yes, Spotify put the two things into one app, and Apple will split it up into two. I realistically think Apple's going to end up, I wouldn't say getting rid of Apple Podcasts, but combining it into Apple Music and, putting it in there. I see them doing that, realistically. But, that's my opinion. Like, there's not really much I can tell you on that. What I will say is that I do see a lot of companies going in that direction as well, because look at Google. They're already coming out with their own streaming service. But that's also because Google has their own email service. They have their own cloud storage service. They have their own photo service. They got YouTube. Like, they have their own gaming streaming service. And it's crazy, in my opinion, that, we've gotten to this point. So Apple, I believe this is the direction they're going in, guys. Me being honest with you guys, that's how I view them going about it. Like, I don't really see what Apple can do. Like, there's not really much hardware they can do. And I think it's a smart pivot, and I think it's not only a smart pivot, but I also think it's a good way to freshen things up a bit. Making the releases not so predictable, making them unpredictable, because it gets boring when you already know everything that's going to happen. It's like going into a movie and you already know everything that's going to happen. Like, what's the point in watching it? You already know what happens. There's no suspense. Like, people will say, oh, but I want to see it and see how this plays out. Like, I read it, but I want to see it. But you already know what's going to happen. It's boring. Like, to me, that doesn't click. It doesn't make sense. But Apple is surprising us because they just dropped these things out of nowhere and we didn't know about them. Obviously, yes, they're not major upgrades. Obviously, with the iPads being the exception. But, you know, what happens if they end up doing this with new iPhones or even new Apple Watches? Obviously, they're being realistic. They probably won't because they have to have the iPhones and the Apple Watches for their conferences. Obviously, I do believe that we'll either in the late 2019 conference, let's just call it that, I believe we're going to get new Mac Pros. I think we're going to get, realistically, we're going to get new MacBooks because that's kind of the trend. Obviously, the new iPhones. I believe we will get new AirPods for sure. Probably not, well, realistically, unless I don't really see them doing new iPads because they already did the Mini and the Air, really. So, yeah, that's really all I got for you guys. Like, I can't really say much besides being actually surprised by Apple, which is interesting because I always find their events pretty predictable. I find it very linear. And, well, clearly they shocked us because they released some things we didn't even know about. We thought they were going to kill off the Mini and the Air. They didn't. They updated the Macs and the iMac Pros. Like, I don't know, guys. Apple has something up their sleeve, and I'm interested to see what they end up doing this year. So, yeah. Realistically, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know that, yeah, this was a double upload week. I decided to just do it because I was not only in a good mood, but I had a lot of free time on my hands, so I decided to record the episode. Obviously, like I said, it's a rare occurrence that I'll do this. Like, you know, like I told you guys, if I have free time, I am going to be able to upload at least twice a week. But obviously, going back to next week, or going into next week specifically, you know, we're going back to the normal one episode because I have a lot of papers I have to write and my attention needs to be focused towards those papers. Obviously, that's not going to detract from the episode's quality, but you guys get the point. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I love you guys to death. You guys take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. Don't be dumb. And bye, guys. I love you.